Hello, it's April from April's Home. Today I'm here to share with you one of my favorite brownie recipes. These are not a standard brownie, these are golden brownies. So this is a recipe that my mother used to make when I was a child. I really love them. She would often make them during the holiday season, but I like this recipe so much I do enjoy making it year round. So from time to time, if I don't feel like chocolate chip cookies, I make a golden brownie. So for this recipe, you will need some flour and sugar and brown sugar. You'll need baking powder, salt, and vanilla. You'll need 3/4 cup of butter and 3 eggs, as well as a bag of chocolate chips. You can just use Nestle Toll House chocolate chips, but today I'm going to go ahead and use this brand here. You will need some cooking spray to coat your baking pan. You'll need a big bowl and an electric mixer, and the pan that we'll be baking this in is a little bit bigger than a standard 9 by 13. The recipe calls for this pan to be 15 by 10 by 1 inch. I'm going to go ahead and use one of my lasagna baking pans. It's slightly different dimensions than the 15 by 10 by 1, but it's pretty close, and I think it'll do the trick. The ticket is it has to be bigger than a 9 by 13 pan. This is a pretty big recipe. And we will start by preheating our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start by softening my 1.5 or 3/4 cup of butter in the microwave, probably for just like 30 seconds, just enough to make it so that I can mix it with ease. Okay, so I've softened my butter. I'm going to go ahead and add that to my mixing bowl. I'm going to go ahead and use a spatula to get all of that out of the bowl. And next I'm going to be adding the sugars. Okay, first I'll add 3/4 cup of packed brown sugar. So here's our first 1/4 cup, our second 1/4 cup, and our third 1/4 cup. And we'll also be adding 3/4 cup of regular white sugar. So that's the first 1/4 cup, second 1/4 cup, and third 1/4 cup. And I'll also add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I just use the lid of my vanilla bottle. It's about a teaspoon. And now I'm going to go ahead and mix this together until it's all nice and combined and looks nice and creamy. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and add 1 egg at a time and blend after each addition of egg. So here's our first egg. And then our second egg. You can see it's looking nice and light and getting fluffier. And now we'll add our final egg. And we'll get this all blended together. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and stir in our dry ingredients. And a lot of times people will mix this into 2 separate bowls. They'll mix their flour and baking powder and salt in a separate bowl and then add it at this point. But I like to just add the flour right to the top of the wet ingredients and then add the salt and the baking powder to the top of the flour, and using my little tablespoon incorporate that through the flour really good and then blend it with the wet ingredients below. So I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. We'll start with 2 cups of flour. So here's our first cup of flour and our second cup of flour. And again, we're not going to incorporate this into the bottom yet without first incorporating the salt and baking powder into the flour, which again, if you're more comfortable doing that in a separate bowl, you can do that. So we need 1 teaspoon of salt. And I will go ahead and leave all the ingredients listed in the description box below. So there's a teaspoon of salt, and I'm just kind of spreading it over the top of the flour here. Then using my tablespoon or teaspoon here, I'll incorporate it into the flour without letting it get into the wet ingredients below yet. And then we need 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So here's 1 and 2. And again, before we mix this in with the wet ingredients below, we're going to really make sure to get that baking powder mixed throughout the flour and salt mixture. That way it'll be evenly distributed throughout the recipe. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and turn back on my electric mixer and get this all blended together. I like to start with it on a lower setting so that the flour doesn't fly up into the air rather than being incorporated in with the wet dough. Okay, so it looks like we've got that pretty well incorporated. I'm going to go ahead and get a rubber scraper and make sure that all the flour on the bottom has been incorporated into the batter. So now I'm going to go ahead and take this rubber scraper and check that the flour has not sunk to the bottom of the dough. And it looks like it's all mixed in really nicely. And now it's time to add the chocolate chips. Okay, we'll add the entire bag. And now I'm going to go ahead and mix these in. You could do this by hand or with your electric mixer if you'd like. Again, making sure to get that all evenly mixed together. Okay, and that is our dough all ready to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and get our pan out. Okay, so I have my large pan here ready to go. Again, this is the pan I use for my lasagna. Got a little bit of dough there from the rubber scraper I set in here. You want to make sure that this is thoroughly coated, and then we'll go ahead and transfer our dough to this pan and spread it out evenly with our rubber scraper. Okay, just scrape that out into the pan. Okay, now I'm just going to spread the dough evenly throughout this pan. So I have the dough all spread out evenly on the bottom of my pan, and now I'm going to go ahead and get this in my preheated 350-degree oven. It bakes for around half an hour, but I'll definitely check on this around the 20-25 minute mark, and I'll let you know at the end how long it took to bake, but everyone's oven is different, so I like to definitely check on these before the recipe calls for it to be done. Again, this recipe calls for between 30 and 35 minutes at a preheated 350-degree oven. So I'm going to go ahead and get these in the oven, and I'll be back to show you how they turned out. Okay, so my golden brownies are all out of the oven. It took 25 minutes, and you can see they're a nice golden brown, and the edges, around the edges, it's a little bit darker, but you don't want it to get any darker than that. And I inserted a knife here, and it came out clean. So now I'm going to go ahead and just let these cool all the way. Then I'm going to go ahead and cut them into brownies. Then I'll get them all served up and give them a try. My golden brownies are completely cooled down now. I've gone ahead and cut a few so that we can try these now. Now, I have made this in the past in a slightly smaller pan, and they have risen up just a little bit more than these. These are a little bit thin. They still look absolutely delicious. This is really how they are meant to look according to the recipe. But if you have a slightly smaller pan, that's okay. A 9x13 would be a little bit too small, I think, but a pan a little bit smaller than this would probably be fine. So again, these are golden brownies, and I'm going to go ahead and give this one a try. You can see they're really good. The chocolate chips are all throughout there. They've got a really nice soft texture, and these taste absolutely delicious. These are almost like a cross between a brownie and a cookie. They're not quite a chocolate chip cookie. They're quite a bit softer than that, a little bit more the texture of a brownie, but also not quite as ooey gooey as a standard brownie either. You can see that they do have sort of a nice glistening top there. They're very good. So that is my recipe for golden brownies. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this delicious recipe. This is going to make a very nice dessert for tonight after dinner. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.